All right, we're going to move from the garden posse to talk about a bunch of plants that look like they may have stepped up to the gallows. We have a lot of plants out there that have really suffered from the frost this year, aloes and agaves. And here to talk about some of those plants and how we can tell if they're dead or alive is Jeff Pavlat, who is the president of the Austin Cactus and Succulent Society. Welcome back to Central Texas Gardener.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
You have a spectacular garden filled with these plants. How did you fare this winter?
My garden did pretty well. I have some damage to some of the plants. I don't think I really lost too much, but I did do a lot of preparation. I covered with almost anything I could find in my house and garage, just trying to get ready, and it worked pretty well. My temperature went down only to about 16, which isn't as bad as some people in our area. But.
Right. And you have some images that show some of the extraordinary preparations that you do. And for a lot of species, this is highly recommended. You actually had little frames, and it had a heat source under the frames, which was a light, right? Yeah,
I just use for Christmas decoration displays. They make these little stakes that go in the ground and hold a halogen light bulb, and you just put that into the ground under the plants, make sure it doesn't touch anything because the light is hot enough it can't actually burn the plants.
Right.
But that's enough to heat the plants. Most of what I do that for are aloes, because aloes in our area are a little bit tricky because they can only really take temperatures down probably to about 20 at the most. Most of them are mush even at that temperature.
Yeah.
So a little bit of protection keeps them going through the winter.
Well, we're talking about two plant families that have really become incredibly popular in the past few years here in Austin, and some of which we never dared garden with before. This winter has been kind of like a return to form almost. This is like winters we had 20 years ago.
Yeah, well, this did a good job of clearing out a few things that aren't really hardy for this area. I've noticed driving around town.
Right.
But I was actually surprised how well some things performed. But, you have to remember on growing plants like these, there's a huge range for succulents in temperature. Some things are killed with the lightest frost, and other things can go to temperatures as low as -20, which hopefully we don't ever see.
But so, for sure.
So you just have to make sure you pick the correct plants that are going to work. So.
And one resource that's available on the Austin Cactus and Succulent Society website is a list of a lot of these plants and their hardiness, which is an important thing to have and is a nice resource that's available. My next question has to do, though, with say you've already planted a lot of these in the yard, and you're walking through and you're trying to assess which of these guys are going to make it or which ones I'm going to have to dig out. What are the key things you need to look for?
As far as what's going to make it, I don't know if if you are after the frost, if a plant, you can tell they're going to be damaged, but if the center portion of the plant is still firm and green, then it's probably going to grow back out. I brought along some examples of plants like that, if the center is okay, it's going to survive. If the whole plant looks like mush, it's going to be time to take it out.
Well, you said the whole plant looks like mush. So let me gesture to this exhibit A over here of plants looking like mush. This is an agave. I'm not sure exactly which species. To me, this looks like a goner.
It's definitely a goner. Not only is it a goner, there were a few offsets underneath the leaves. They're also gone. The whole plant is mush, and I left it out as a test to see how cold hardy it was, and it didn't really pass.
I would say that.
But I believe it was Agave titanota, but I wasn't ever really sure on it.
Well, I mean, and that whole thing that you talked about, if it's firm, you can tell. And I'm going into here to the base, and it all feels watery and soft. So not a happy guy here at all.
And if you pull the center, it will probably come right out.
Yeah. So
and that's just a good sign that it's gone. You can tell.
Now, on the other hand, you have some samples from some aloes here that I want to bring out, and these are all from the same plant.
They are.
It's quite a variety that you get here, all from the same plant. You have some foliage looking pretty darn healthy, really looking good.
This was covered with a blanket. It didn't have a light bulb. Now, the plant that's the most damaged here, that one was the highest up. And that,
of course,
if you snip that off, it'll branch back out. If you look at the bottom of those pieces, all of them are still firm.
Yeah, and you can see how that looks right there. Yeah, you're right. And I'm holding this, even the one that's most damaged, still feels firm, nice, good, almost woody. Yeah, just what you would expect, right?
And everywhere I cut those off, it's going to branch back out.
Okay. So just you can go through the plant and maybe remove something like this entirely.
And on removing things, I would wait until probably about March to start trimming up your stuff. I haven't touched anything in my garden just because you don't really know how bad the damage is. Some things are going to die back a little bit more. And also, if you cut off all of the dead stuff and then the temperature drops back down again, then it may freeze what was still good. So I would recommend leaving it.
Well, here's an example of a agave that looks really sad. However, you look at the top of it. It looks, an aloe, excuse me, it looks very much like the agave over here to my right, like it's a goner. However, if you look down here at the base, again, nice and firm, and some green there.
Yes, and you can see all of the leaves that are mushy on the outside, they're definitely gone. Now, after a few more weeks, they'll start to dry up, and you can either just snap them off or trim them off.
Right.
But as long as that center is okay, it should grow back out. And you can tell the roots are healthy and yellow, which is what's typical for an aloe.
Okay.
And so that plant would be fine. If you put it back in the ground, it should grow back out.
Okay. And likewise, we have some agave leaves here, and this is a fairly common form of agave here locally. And this is from your garden.
It is.
It was prominently featured in a piece we did on your garden, I think.
Last year, I think it was the opening shot.
Right.
The plant isn't dead. I covered it. It burned it somewhat. You can see the leaves range, you know, on how bad they were burned. But the center of it is still good, and probably it'll take, you know, most of this year to grow back out. But it's, you know, it's not going to be gone.
Okay.
But it was covered.
Well, let's show some people some hardy, dependable varieties, And you've got some really gorgeous plants here. This is the golden barrel cactus, correct?
It is.
And how did these fare in your garden?
They were fine. I did throw a blanket over them kind of last minute because they kept lowering the expected low. They're usually good to about 15. And I know places in town, they were totally uncovered and were at least 15 or 16, and they were fine.
Okay.
Mine were all fine without any damage, with just towels and blankets thrown over.
So golden barrel cactus is a good one. This is a fish hook cactus, which is, I think, a really cool one. And this is another cold hardy variety.
And it's a Texas native. And it is good down to about 0 is what it's reported. I've never had one get that cold, but and the ones that I had were perfectly fine.
Let's hope that they never get that cold for all of our sakes. 0 degrees would be a hard one here in Austin. We've come close before, but it's been almost 25 years, I think. And this is the squid agave, which is a rambunctious little plant that really performs well for us. How did it do in the cold this year?
It was perfectly fine. That one actually sat through down under a tree. I probably would have put it in my greenhouse if I'd remembered it was there, but it was perfectly fine. There wasn't any damage at all.
So in this little
6-inch
pot, it was sitting out in that temperature, and it did okay.
And it didn't have any trouble.
Okay, very good. And I want to point out the Agave Victoria Regina, because I think this is one of my favorites. Agaves are hard to choose a favorite because they're so cool. But this is one that just does tremendously well for us.
Yes, I mean, it's a beautiful plant, and it does really well here, and it's very hardy. It's down into somewhere at least 5, something like that, degrees.
Okay. So, Jeff, I know that people are going to want to hook up with you, learn about more about these plants, and there's some opportunities coming up in April. There are 2 shows coming up. Austin on the 11th and 12th, Austin Cactus and Succulent Society show. And where's that held?
That's at the Zilker Botanical Garden in the Garden Center.
And then also, just shortly after that, another show in San Antonio, and that's going to be happening 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. So we hope that our folks will check that out. Also learn more about all the things that you have to offer on our own website. So thanks so much again for coming back on Central Texas Garden.
Thanks a lot.
All right, and good luck to all you guys out there in the garden. Coming up next is Daphne Richard.